Horizon Jensen Rusuji reaction. This is Trope Talk, Sins of the Father. Yeah, this is by the channel Sarcastic production. I was gonna do the blue video on some history, but this was the recent upload. Just came over notification, so I'm like, screw it, I'm gonna react to this one. Yeah, I love trope talk, talking about your, usual tropes. Sins of the Father, yeah. It's gonna be fun with all the vengeance and revenge factor probably. So yeah. It's not quite revenge, but it's revenge adjacent. Yeah, I mean, somebody did something, and they basically go after, the person's family because person's not there or something, person died or something, person's kid, usually that's the case. So yeah. Let's talk about a trope where nobody gets what they deserve, and thanks to patron James for requesting this video. I don't know why I read it like it's some kind of a, saint, like biblical patron, but yeah, patron James. Shout out to The Last of Us 2 for giving me an absolute iconic cycle of vengeance example. I love it when stories are creative, but I love it more when they give me a completely by the book trope execution to use as an example forever. I know that example is one of the best modern illustration of the trope, but that doesn't make this thumbnail any less patently absurd. Yeah. Sins of the Father, it is ridiculous how many times that gets repeated in movies and even games and everywhere, isn't it? Because that's one of the textbooks example of how to lead a story. Like somebody's father did something bad, and now the kid grows up and it haunts the kid, and something like that. Someone's ancestor did something and things like that. So yeah, this is gonna be a fun video. I recorded quite a few Only Sarcastic production videos already. If you haven't seen them, check out the classes, playlist video for it. Only Sarcastic production reaction. I'll upload lots of videos in 24 hours, so you might have missed some of them. Check that out. Check out other playlists too, like Internet Historian, CGP Grey, Kazakhstan Nutshell, Tier Zoo, History, and yeah, let's watch this one.
This video was sponsored by Campfire Blaze. The ramifications of this will be felt for generations to come. Revenge is a funny old thing. It's such a simple character motivation. At its heart, it's just anger in its purest form. Character A experiences something very bad and is thus filled with rage, and decides to direct that rage out at character B, who they hold responsible. It's theoretically okay because character B deserves to experience something bad because they did something bad to character A. Character A's garden variety anger at experiencing something painful magically transforms into righteous fury once it's being directed at somebody who deserves it. But the thing about anger is it doesn't actually handle being directed very well. Sure, theoretically character A will be able to target all their righteous fury at the villainous character B, but sometimes in the process it turns out that character B actually isn't responsible. Well, then what's character A supposed to do? The reasonable thing might be to let go of the anger and move on, but if character A has been letting that anger drive them, that's not such an easy thing to do. But character A's anger can no longer be righteously directed at character B.
Yeah, see, that's one of the key things why lots of people have, anxieties and stress, and by working out even on a treadmill and any physical activity, their stresses go away for things like this. Because whatever stress they have, it usually is about frustration or something, anger or something. So now anger is the kind of thing that you have to let it out somehow. It's not gonna stay in, all right? One way or another, you have to take it out. So, anger cannot just stay inside of you. It has to come out one way or another. So basically physical activity basically is like, letting your anger out by, physically stressing yourself. Physically, making yourself you go to the limit. So you feel like you did some physical activity. In that sense, I guess some form of your anger and frustration gets out. That's why, any physical activity you do, it's a great stress reliever for that reason. So yeah, anger is one of those things, like if you don't let it out, it's gonna come out one way or another, whether you realize it or not. And it's going to be bad.
It's not righteous fury if the target of that fury doesn't actually deserve it. If character A unleashes their vengeance on the undeserving character B, well, that's not vengeance anymore. That's just hurting someone innocent, which is an unequivocally bad thing to do. Even more unfairly, sometimes character B does deserve that vengeance, but character B isn't available for some reason. Like maybe character B is already dead, for instance. Or character B is available, but unleashing the vengeance on them will definitely hurt the unrelated and entirely innocent character C. What's character A supposed to do with all that anger now that there's nowhere righteous to put it? Fundamentally, vengeance is an ultimately inherently selfish act, an attempt to soothe an injured soul by hurting the injurer right back. Vengeance has a twist of justice to it, framing that crusade as a matter of fairness or balance, bringing justice to an unjust universe. But while we can equivocate on the meaning of justice or fairness or deserving, none of that actually matters here, because vengeance is motivated by anger, and anger is an amoral emotion. It doesn't actually matter to the anger if the person it's taken out on deserves it. Anger just demands an outlet. It's up to the person to choose a target for that outlet. And if you want to retain some semblance of morality, that means you have to find a target who you could argue deserves to be hurt. Vengeance frames itself as just.
That's why people usually, give this kind of advice and whatever, basically anger's not a good thing. You need to find a way to manage your anger, basically, for the reasons like this, because anger always increases inside of you. It always multiplies in a way if you don't let it out, and it will come out one way or another. It doesn't matter where it comes out, because anger doesn't care. In one way or another, it will come out. It probably will hurt people that are closer to you. So yeah.
Justice, but will be satisfied with the illusion of justice, an eye for an eye no matter who that eye is from. If the actual wrongdoer isn't available, the avenger will often shift their focus to the next best thing. This is how we get the sins of the father situation, where someone is held responsible for actions they didn't do simply because they're connected to the person who did it. The archetypical sins of the father scenario is a child being held responsible for their parents' crimes, but it can be stretched to cover anyone being punished for someone else's actions, from family or loved ones being targeted for their personal connection, to distant descendants being assigned some kind of bloodline curse, to any revenge by proxy that depends on the suffering of someone who has personally not committed their crime they're being punished for.
Most famously, entire race, even the religion, and any group of people. I mean, that is the most famous thing, especially around the medieval times. Entire towns got murdered because, somebody did something from that town.
Now, the term sins of the father broadly originates in the Tanakh, where it appears in two specifically conflicting contexts. In Exodus, the sins of the father concept is brought up by God, saying he's a big fan of punishing the children for the sins of the parents to the third and the fourth generation of those who hate me. But then in Ezekiel, which was written sometime later, God says the whole sins of the father thing has been deprecated and is no longer part of his policy for the 1.1 alpha release, and now he judges everyone based on their own merits rather than holding a generational grudge.
Yeah, that's the thing with Christianity, isn't it? There are lots of patches and even a massive overhaul with the New Testament. Yeah, I think, the first thing about, the punishing the children for the third and fourth generation, I think anybody who came up with probably thought that if we put this, I guess people will be more afraid to do bad things, because it's not just about them or their children, it's going to carry over in their family tree along the line, even to the third generation, basically. So they'll be more, I guess, afraid to do bad things. That was the case. Then probably they realized, like, wait a minute, people are actually using this case to punish the people who has nothing to do with this, even the children. So they probably realized that. So they, basically changed it. Like, okay, let's take this out. This is not helping anyone.
Saying, therefore I will judge you, O house of Israel, everyone according to his ways. So when it comes to the question, should the child be held responsible for the sins of the father, there is technically biblical precedent for both answers, but no is definitely the more justifiable one, since it came later and was written as a direct response to the original yes angle, and it's also the one that is broadly more fair. Now, beyond its origins, the sins of the father...
Look, man, I don't care if there is a biblical precedent or any precedent, alright? You should use your common sense, basically, when you're trying to think something, your moral compass, basically. You shouldn't look at anything, your religion or anything. If my religion says it's fine, then it's fine. That's never a good thing, all right? I don't care if your religion says that, sins of the father is a good thing. Like if it's in the religious book, I mean, punishing the child is fine. No, it's it's wrong. So it's wrong. I mean, you have your inner moral compass, you can think rationally. What the father did has nothing to do with the kid. What the hell did the kid do? So yeah.
Father trope has obviously developed pretty far and plays a role in most revenge stories because, like we've discussed, revenge is motivated by anger, and anger is pretty notorious for causing collateral damage. If character B wrongs character A and character A embarks on a quest for vengeance, character B is not going to be the only character who pays for it. Even if character A stays entirely focused on character B, the people in character B's life are going to feel the effects. Friends, loved ones, family. One way or another, the people who care about character B will feel the impact of the revenge plot, even if the only person character A directly targets is character B. Those characters are thus being indirectly punished for sins they're not responsible for. But there are a lot of ways to handle revenge, and many of them are heavier on the collateral damage than the more precision-targeted version. For instance, sometimes the collateral is actually the point. Character A might seek revenge on character B by actively targeting their loved ones to systematically strip away the things character B cares about. This is much more common with villainous revenge plots, and let's actually explore that, because revenge has a very interesting relationship with morality and heroism. I've mentioned that revenge is usually built on a white-hot core of amoral anger surrounded by a thin candy coating of plausible morality, that it's okay to make people people suffer because you're in pain and angry as long as they're bad people who deserve it. Now, while revenge is almost never seen as unconditionally heroic, certain kinds of revenge plots are seen as more heroic.
No, usually revenge plot. I mean, it depends. Most of the time, if you are just bent out on revenge, trying to hurt people, it usually points you like nobody's blaming you, but you are gone dark or something like that. It's never it's never reflected good on you. So I don't think revenge, even if it's targeted at the people that deserves it or anything, it's still something you're going on a path that is darker. That's what it's considered, I guess.
This usually corresponds with minimal collateral damage and targeting the actual individual wrongdoer largely exclusively. If the villain hurts the hero and the hero hurts them right back, that's usually just looped into the general space of hero versus villain. In fact, while heroes usually oppose villains on an ideological basis most of the time, adding that revenge motivation by making the villain personally hurt the hero sometimes serves to make the hero seem more appealing to the audience, to make their investment in the plot more personal. Which is weird because fundamentally, as we've discussed, revenge is not a moral act. It's not a heroic thing to do. It's a sublimation of anger and frustration at an acceptable target. Theoretically, the target is the person who caused that anger, but in practice, that's not really how it works. There's a difference between taking revenge and the unconditionally heroic act of stopping somebody who's hurt people from hurting more people. Since the sublimation of the anger is the actual driving point of a revenge plot, it usually doesn't end up mattering who the target really is. Heroes can have vengeance arcs, but vengeance is not a heroic motivation. It's a selfish one, and the sins of the father angle highlights that. On paper and from a logical standpoint, if the person who hurt character A is not available for vengeance, character A should stop seeking vengeance. That's the rational thing to do. Since getting justice is no longer an option, they should focus on healing instead. This is the morally good, unequivocally heroic option. But the vengeance motivation usually doesn't just go away, especially if character A has been relying on it to keep them going and give them a purpose in life. So character A might choose a new target, in the process revealing the truth of their motivation. Vengeance doesn't demand justice, only personal satisfaction. Character A is now actively seeking a target for their anger rather than pursuing justice against the individual who personally harmed them. This is not heroic, but that doesn't mean heroes don't have this kind of arc. For instance, almost every dark vigilante superhero has some variant of this motivation, where instead of taking out their anger on the specific person who hurt them, they choose other targets who they think deserve to be punished or need to be stopped, and take out their anger on them en masse. The motivation is still self-centered and self-destructive, but the outcome is stopping bad guys, so it theoretically works as a heroic motivation. The audience is inclined to agree that stopping bad guys is a good thing to do, so it works as a candy coating on the directionless rage center to their motivation. But things get much more dubious if the avenging character isn't just targeting people who the audience agrees needs to be stopped or deserves to be punished. The character isn't pursuing justice for selfish reasons, they're pursuing personal satisfaction for selfish reasons, which is a selfishness double whammy. The sins of the father vengeance variant is where this starts getting really obvious. Cause see, character B is the one who wronged character A, but character B isn't available to pay for their crimes. Instead, we have character C, whose only crime is being affiliated with character B. And no matter how bad character B is, associating with them is not a
Yeah, but these characters that basically, like Punisher and things like that, the characters who basically points their anger towards the bad people, even those bad people did not hurt him personally, but he's just, pointing his anger towards them. But he's not going to target these bad people's family. I mean, that's how we know that even though this, with this guy with anger, hurting people with vengeance, is a good guy because he's not going to hurt innocents, But yeah, in the end, in real world, vengeance based lots of time, works badly because it usually ends up hurting the family and even the entire families and things like that. I guess towns and things, whatever. And it usually ends up bad for a lot of people. That's what the vengeance factor goes to. Like somebody wronged somebody, now that somebody comes after that particular person, but the person's not available, so he's gonna blame the entire basically family, or sometimes even the entire race, religion, and hurt them in a sense. So yeah.
equivalent to doing whatever it is character B did, and thus is automatically not deserving of character A's retribution. Heroic characters are less likely to take revenge by proxy, but less morally stalwart characters might take what they can get, leaving character C suffering for a crime they didn't commit and had no part in. It's not unheard of for protagonists to seek vengeance by proxy, but it's much more common with villains, and it's even more common for these villains to be targeting...
Which protagonist did that though? Do you know of any movie, TV show, any story anywhere where a good guy protagonist basically hurt the family member for vengeance or something? Because how would that even work?
Heroes for their revenge by proxy, since that's an easy way to drive large portions of the plot. Now, there's a few specific sub-variants of the sins of the father trope. The plain vanilla option is that the avenging character wants vengeance, but the original avengee isn't available, frequently because they're already dead, so the avenger seeks...
your parent did something bad to me and I'm gonna make that your problem. He's like, my name has a junior behind it. I'm already screwed. What more do you want?
Picks out the person closest to them to work out their frustrations on, often a direct descendant. This can be something of a double whammy for the descendant in question, since if their parent/ancestor is unavailable/dead, they might already have some complexes about that, which are only going to be exacerbated by some supervillain popping out of the woodwork to attack them for stuff their absentee ancestor did. This is pretty common in cases where the avenging character just wants some kind of symbolic payback and doesn't really care who pays for it. There's also a fairly passive form of the sins of the father thing, where instead of somebody actively setting out to make a character suffer for the crimes of their predecessor, they're just held passively responsible for other pre-existing bad stuff. The sins of the father might be used as a justification or a karmic explanation for why bad things happen to this character, or are allowed to happen without any help. Sure, if bad things happen to someone randomly, that's bad, and you might want to help them, but if the character's existence is in some way cursed, that handily explains every bad thing they go through, and conveniently absolves any bystanders from feeling obligated to help them out. Sorry, buddy, will of the universe. Shouldn't have been born like that. This variant is on
Yeah, God, yeah, that used to happen in the past time a lot, isn't it? In really old times. That's why, it's old times were really frightening. Because of the, crown changes, battles, entire towns got murdered, people's mentalities was just wrong. Like, his father was this and this, and his basically grandfather was this and this bad guy. So anything bad happening to them, nobody helps him up because, okay, he's cursed because of that. He's getting punished for his father or even his grandfather's, sins or whatever. So kid suffers. And that is a kid. I'm not talking about adult here. A kid suffers and nobody does anything about it. Because in their mind, it's all justified. Because they just thought this thing up. Like, it's justified because it's sins of the father. He's suffering because of all the karmic justice or whatever. And that used to happen in the past. That is so effed up. Right now, imagining a kid suffering, nobody helping the kid out because of bullshit like that. It just hurts, man. People say, if I have a time machine, I would go to this time and that time. I would not, man. Fuck that. Past times were not good.
Paper more inoffensive than active vengeance, but it's elevated somewhat in the heinousness department by having the distinction of being a disturbingly popular attitude in the real world. By definition, nobody deserves the circumstances they're born into. You can't deserve anything if you haven't done anything yet. But it's a very popular cop-out to ignore or dismiss someone's systemic suffering as a matter of karma or predestination or the will of the universe rather than shit luck, active malice, and zero support. For a super fun real-world example, the Book of Genesis briefly mentions something called the Curse of Ham, a curse Noah invokes after his son Ham does something gross. In response, Noah curses Ham's son Canaan to be a servant to his brethren. This curse is vague and not described in further detail, but someone decided the exact nature of the curse was that Canaan's skin got darker, and furthermore that the curse of Ham was a really convenient way to morally justify slavery. No guys, it's not morally abhorrent for a good Christian to own a living, breathing human being with a soul, it's just a bloodline curse. Sure, you didn't do anything to deserve this, but because one guy did, thousands of years ago, you get a lifetime of agony and humiliation, and I am totally morally.
Martin Luther King went out of his way to explain why this was both morally terrible and biblically unsupported. Okay.
Cool. So in short, this approach gets used to passively justify a lot of really fun atrocities because it's a lot easier to feel good about yourself as a person if you can blame a bunch of dead guys for everyone you go out of your way to hurt. Anyway, a slightly less gross and more complicated variant happens when the target in question is in some way actively benefiting from their ancestors' crime. This version muddies the question of how much they deserve to be targeted. Sure, they didn't do the actual bad thing, but they are actively reaping the rewards. Maybe their predecessors stole the money that made their family rich, or usurped the throne they sit on, and the avenging antagonist wants justice for what was taken for them. The target didn't actually do anything wrong, but that doesn't mean they aren't in some way responsible for their own life and circumstances. And if those circumstances are built on a crime, you could argue that they do bear some responsibility to try and mend the damage of that.
No, they don't. I mean, come on, man. What are they supposed to do? I mean, screw it. I'll give all that up. How is that going to change the past? The point is they didn't do nothing, regardless if they're reaping rewards or not. I mean, it depends in the context. If they can do reparation in some way to the person that was wronged, they should do that. If they don't, I guess you could say that, they could do something they are not, so they should be held responsible somewhat, ask for reparations or something, whatever. But, trying to do something good because, whatever their ancestor did bad, reap them all these rewards, so they should use that reward to help the people who was wronged or something, sure. But you can't directly blame the person. It has nothing to do with this.
that crime. Of course, frequently, the avenging character makes things morally simpler by going far beyond justice or fixing the damage done by the original crime and aiming for burn everything to the ground instead, which is much easier for a hero to categorically oppose than a complex question about personal responsibility. Still, this is one of the more nuanced variants, and the target frequently does agree that they have some responsibility to try and make things right, so that at minimum this kind of crime doesn't happen again on their watch. It's not their responsibility to suffer for the satisfaction of the Avenger, but it is their responsibility to try and make things right. This is also one of those things that has some pretty heavy real-world questions about it. On the refreshingly fictional side of things, there's a very simple variant of this trope where the bad guy is immortal, or at least very old, and has a grudge against some long-dead character who just happens to look almost exactly like one of the heroes, and it doesn't particularly matter to them, the actual person who wronged them is long gone. They'll just take out their aggression on this conveniently identical stranger. This version is entirely unjustified and pretty much 100% bad guys only. It's also easily solved with a mustache and a new pair of glasses. But back into the nuance zone, there's the feuding.
Or maybe stabbing the bad guy, because this is a bullshit. This is just an excuse. He could just say a person with, I guess, 2 hands and 2 legs. That's fine enough for me. So now he's just, I guess, finding any excuse.
Families variant, where the sins of the father don't just fall on one person. For whatever reason, 2 groups have been fighting for generations, and everyone is held responsible for the actions of their group, no matter how
family
young
feuds
and
and
innocent
blood,
they are. The grudge runs deeper than any actual personal responsibility, and the only reason these guys need to fight is that the other guy is from the other group. Pretty much the archetypical example of this uniquely stupid variant is Romeo and Juliet, where the original grudge is literally never explained, because it doesn't need to be explained. This variant probably most clearly illustrates how utterly irrational and self-centered this vengeance trope is. The characters don't even have a reason to hate each other. What they have
Seriously.
is
I mean, there's lots of stories and even the movies I've seen where, there are family feuds, blood feuds from the really past times, like centuries past, and they'll just have this family feud. The current people who are even fighting, who are actually alive, they're like, okay, why the hell are we fighting? We don't even want to fight. And usually it ends with that revelation, like, it has to have a good ending. So, movie ends with some kind of revelation like that, like, okay, why are we even fighting and this and that? I mean, we don't even want to fight. It's just because some kind of stupid family feud and this and that. But yeah.
is an excuse. The Capulets and Montagues both have an acceptable target they can take out any and all of their aggression on whenever they want, and the only reason they need is our families hate each other. For all we know, some 9th century Capulets painted the Montague villa polka dots, and there's been blood in the streets of Verona ever since. Hell, if you want to extend this trope a little bit into the real world, shocking, I know, let's not make a habit of it, this is basically the justification behind any kind of demographic feud or prejudice. It's never about what the individual targeted person did. It's always about what their group can be held responsible for. It's not a reason to hate or hurt them, it's an excuse to justify hating and hurting them, which in turn is being done for personal self-centered reasons. Because if you're full of anger and hate, it feels really good to take it out on someone, and even better if you can convince yourself they deserve it. This is also pretty much the only real-world justification for war, by the way. It's never about what the soldiers or the civilian casualties did to deserve it. Vengeance isn't profound or moral or justified or anything particularly deep. It's just an inefficient and damaging way to sublimate pain and harmful emotions while seeking some kind of emotional release or catharsis. At its best, it motivates the pursuit of fairness or balance, asking for retribution for an injustice or a wrongdoing, but at its worst, it morphs into victim-seeking, looking for acceptable or justifiable targets to hurt. Vengeance produces the illusion of righteousness because it's an understandable and relatable motivation, but just because someone's been hurt doesn't mean the pain they cause in turn is justified. The sins of the father trope is one of the easiest ways to trigger a cycle of vengeance narrative, where a cavalcade of aggrieved people cause enormous amounts of damage that doesn't end until someone goes out of their way to break the cycle.
Yeah, vengeance is never, even if it's right, never is considered good. Even with the vengeance arc, it usually, like, a person has gone to the dark path or something like that. Even though the person is trying to seek revenge, seek vengeance on the person who wronged the person, and the person is really evil, it still is considered like, okay, he's going in dark path or something like that. That mentality comes like, if you just see it, take eye for an eye, everybody will be blind or something like that. So vengeance arc is always kind of loose. It always is filled with basically anger that could release it on anyone basically, and could have an arc like that. Vengeance, a victim basically seeks vengeance, and just so forth and so on.
Frequently at great personal cost. See, if character B hurts character A and character A takes revenge on them, they can easily hurt character C in the process, even totally incidentally. Maybe character C is just hurt because they care about character B, like for instance if character B is their parent. Character A is very careful to only target character B, but character C loves character B, and there's no way character A can hurt character B without also hurting the totally innocent character C. So now character C is aggrieved and wants vengeance, and it's even justifiable. Character A friggin' murdered their parent. That motivation is so justifiable, it's literally a stock hero motivation. And
yeah, which superhero movie? Is it Superman somewhere? I don't know where, but there is a plot like that, right? I remember hearing like some superhero kills some evil person, but that evil person's kid, who's just small, suffers from that, and he grows up and tries to seek vengeance on them. You can't really blame the kid because kid was hurt, and kid just was seeking vengeance because kid's parent died, even though parent was evil, and the superhero killed the parent, but still.
when they target character A, maybe they end up hurting characters D and E in the process, who develop vengeance motivations of their own, and so on and so forth. Every innocent person incidentally hurt for the sins of the father ends up developing a perfectly justifiable vengeance motivation of their own. This is the exact plot of 6 whole Greek tragedies. Even the most carefully formulated vengeance plan will have collateral damage. The cycle doesn't stop until someone recognizes that just because they're in pain doesn't mean they have a right to hurt people, and stops it. Vengeance can always be justified, but a justification is the same thing as an excuse. At some point, someone needs to pump the brakes and ask what good any of this will actually do. But with all that said, the sins of the father concept is not actually always used in vengeance tropes. Sometimes characters feel responsible for the sins of their ancestors all on their own, no antagonists required. This comes in 3 major flavors. 1, a character tries to make up for the damage their ancestor caused, usually by trying to fix stuff they messed up out of a sense of personal responsibility. 2, a character constantly deals with annoying problems caused by one of their ancestors, which has some significant overlap with the "my ancestor is actually the villain" trope. And 3, a character's ancestor did something really bad and the character worries they might be doomed to follow in their footsteps. This is the less spicy cursed bloodline variant. Maybe the ancestor was some legendary hero or other super cool dude.
I'm wondering right now, what does, Hitler's family member, what were they thinking around that time when all the thing happened? Were they thinking like, oh shit, we bear some responsibility or something like that? Were they thinking like that because, Hitler was one of their family or something? Did Hitler's sister or somebody had kid? Is, Hitler's, family still going on? Because I'm pretty sure there is nobody named Hitler anymore. Even if there were any of them left, they basically changed their name. That's how effed up that was. So, they must be thinking the same thing, like, holy shit. Probably one of the worst name ever, Adolf Hitler, was one of my family members. They would be thinking that. So I don't know how were they feeling.
Dude who failed at a critical moment, and the hero faces the double whammy of living up to the high bar their extremely cool ancestor set and not messing up the same way their much cooler ancestor did. These uses are comparatively rarer than the vengeance-specific versions, since vengeance is a very popular trope overall, but it is important to recognize that sins of the father doesn't always mean someone else is holding the character responsible. Fundamentally, the sins of the father trope is a question, and that question is, who do you hold responsible? In its non-vengeance variant, the character holds themselves responsible for fixing or making up for the damage their ancestor did. But in the vengeance variant, things very easily escalate out of control. Since if the question is reframed as, who do I hold responsible for my suffering, the anger that suffering caused can volunteer the answer, anyone and everyone you can reach. While there's an argument to be made for someone taking responsibility for the actions of their ancestors to try and mitigate or fix the damage, there's no logical reason to hurt the child for the sins of the father. There's just an emotional reason. By definition, the child did nothing wrong and thus deserves nothing bad. Their only crime was proximity to the real problem, and they didn't exactly have a choice in the matter. Because of this, heroic characters usually shy away from their vengeance the minute collateral damage enters the equation. But villainy-inclined characters have more of a tendency to double down and turn their targeted vengeance into a more large-scale crusade. After all, if you squint, maybe the person who hurt you wasn't solely responsible. Maybe the society that enabled them was. Maybe the family that supported them was. Maybe their friends and loved ones are the real villains for not stopping them. If the character is just looking for a target, they can always find one, and they can always justify it, even feel heroic about it. The cycle only breaks when the character starts asking, how can this be fixed, instead of what will make me feel good, or more commonly, when they die. Vengeance crusades have a pretty high mortality rate, especially once the avenging character crosses the burn everything to the ground threshold, which is frequently a pretty easy next step to take after target innocent people for the bad stuff someone else did. Man, that one got spicier than I expected. So, yeah, and thanks again to Campfire Blaze for sponsoring this video. As you may know, Campfire Blaze is a browser-based writing tool designed to help creators stay organized while you write and world build. It's got real-time collaboration tools, if that's your jam, or you can keep it totally private. Campfire Blaze's manuscript module gives you an in-browser word processor you can use to write without losing track of your world-building notes, and it automatically saves your project in the cloud. Plus, it's got an auto-tagging feature that highlights key things in your writing so you can quickly reference details in the world-building you might have lost sight of. Very useful for building complex multi-generational feuds. Campfire Blaze also has dedicated tools for fleshing out locations, locations, maps, cultures, species, magic systems, and more, so you can flesh out the whole story all in one place. Campfire Blaze also comes with 13 genre-based themes like fantasy, sci-fi, romance, and a custom theme creator, so you can pick the vibe and set the story's atmosphere. Campfire Blaze's free version is already feature-packed, but if you want more, you can build your own tool suite and only pay for the modules you need, which run as low as 50 cents each. You can also unlock everything for just a few dollars a month with a 30-day return policy if you change your mind. Check out the link in the description and make sure to use the promo code OSP21 for 20% off a lifetime purchase of Campfire Blaze.
Okay. Yeah, people, click the link in the description with the original video and go there. From there, support the channel by, clicking the link from there, campfiretechnology.com. Yeah. Sins of the Father is a really vast thing. I didn't realize that when I, read the title, but watching the video, yeah, that basically goes with most things, right? People blaming entire towns, blaming entire races, blaming entire religious groups and things like that. Blaming entire family, killing lots of distance family too, just to make sure that, I'm gonna basically wipe the person's name and his family name from the history books or some shit like that. And, lots of twisted logic gets into the play. So, yeah. Alright, people, that was the Trope Talk, Sins of the Father. If you like my reaction, don't forget to like, subscribe, check out the reaction, check out the cast, check out the end cards, and I'll see you next time.